was born in 1974 in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, right in the middle of the Vietnam War, towards the end of it. I am the fifth of six sons within my family, so lots of boys. I grew up in a very big, boisterous family, all boys. We drove our mom crazy, but we had a lot of fun. We also lived in a very big house where my uncle and his family, and he had 7 kids, also lived. So it was a big extended family building, and we had a rooftop terrace where we had a swing, and there were lots of boys in both families, so we just, did what boys did without jumping off the roof. My family, we were refugees from Vietnam. We also left Vietnam with a cousin of ours, a female cousin of ours as well. Every one of us is in the United States now, and living in different parts of the US, with quite a few of us in the Bay Area in California. My memories of my childhood, because I was living in Ho Chi Minh City and the Vietnam War mostly occurred outside of Ho Chi Minh City in the countryside and in the north, I don't remember a lot of negative experiences growing up, in Ho Chi Minh City at the time. What I do remember was that after the war was over, there were times when money was an issue, and that was a stress on the family. I remember, for example, one time when my mom spilled a cup of sugar. She scooped every single granule of that sugar back into the bowl. And that kind of stuck in my memory. I remember the street that I lived on, a narrow street, but there was a lot of life on that street. There were street vendors selling things, people screaming across the street, children running. And I remember really happy memories of just running and walking on that street, holding, my mom's hand. And you don't really get that here in the US. And it's something that I really kind of miss about growing up in Vietnam. And I particularly remember one morning, my mom and I were trying to buy some sweet, soupy dessert, like a red bean dessert, that's in a big pot by this lady selling it in the street. And when she scooped it up, there was a giant cockroach in it. And I remember the lady just taking the cockroach and throwing it aside, and then me just being completely traumatized seeing this cockroach in the red bean soup. And that was like a happy memory of just kind of, that's what street life was like in Vietnam. There was one, though, more traumatic experience for my childhood, which is that after the war was over, and the new government took over, my family did go through some really rough times because my father was a former soldier in the South Vietnamese army, which was the enemy of the new government. We are also ethnically Chinese, which is in some ways kind of the enemy of the new government. And my father was an entrepreneur, and that makes him, the enemy of a communist government. He was constantly harassed. And I remember one morning I went to a cafe near where we lived. And I can still picture this cafe in my mind. It was a corner cafe where they are completely open on both sides. The streets and the elements all kind of coming into this cafe with this incredible kind of boisterous, chaotic vibe of a Vietnamese morning that everyone is having coffee. And I sat down on a table with my father. Suddenly, the entire cafe was surrounded by soldiers, all with their guns drawn. And they came into the cafe and they started to question certain people, and then they grabbed my father and then they took him away. And I still remember kind of just the feeling of, well, I'm a small child, I'm here by myself, they just took my father away from me. Like that kind of just fear of being abandoned and fear of just a lot of soldiers with guns. That was an incredibly traumatic kind of image I have in my head that I still to this day can remember very vividly. My father was taken away for questioning, which is not the first time that has happened. And fortunately, there was a neighbor who recognized me and was able to take me home that morning. And my father did return a couple of hours later from the police station. I don't know what happened. He didn't tell me. It's not something he would tell me. But all I know is that incident led my family to leave family and everything behind in Vietnam and to escape the country. I remember very vividly the day that we left Vietnam. Something is really driving me to leave, and I didn't really understand that back then, but I think I do now, because our business was ruined, that our parts of our house was taken away, that economically the country was in a very dire situation, that getting enough food on the table suddenly became a concern for my family, who was more well off before the end of the war. That's something that if you're not a refugee, like, how would you know how that feels, right? Like, until you're pushed to that edge. But I do remember the day that I left. And my first memory was right when we stepped out of our house and saying goodbye to my uncle and his family who lived with us. And I remember that being quite a sad moment. Even as a young child, I knew that that was a very long or permanent goodbye that was happening. We were all put into a truck, and the truck drove away, and it was in pitch black because you're inside of this enclosed truck. And I remember that I was sitting in the truck, and there was a big hole at the bottom of the truck. As a child, I think my immediate feeling was looking at a hole and thinking, I'm going to fall through this hole. I think I was just grabbing onto my brother, making sure that I didn't fall through the hole. And then I remember that we arrived, again, super early in the morning, pitch dark, in a farm. And we were told to hide in the chicken coop with all the chickens. And I still remember to these days the chickens that we had to stay with for a few hours. They then drove us to the dock where the boat was. I've never seen something physical this big in my life. And this is because this was literally a cargo ship that was about to house more than 3,000 refugees. The next thing I remembered was really to get from where we were standing to get on the boat, we had to climb to the deck of the boat. And that's a multi-story climb that you had to do on ropes. So I remember having to grab onto my older brother around his neck while he then climbed the rope onto the boat. The boat ride itself, somebody within our family knew one of the cabin crews. And so one of the cabin crews actually gave us their cabin. This is a cabin for one person on a boat. But they put 4 of us in there, and then they put a second family with us into this cabin. So there were about 6 or 7 people in a one-person cabin. But the crazy thing was that we were one of the lucky ones because we got a cabin. Most of them did not have a cabin, and they were on the deck or anywhere they could find space. And the boat ride itself was around 3 to 4 days. So our goal was to sail from Vietnam to Hong Kong. The way that we escaped Vietnam was that we had to bribe government officials with gold bars. My family had to borrow money in order to have enough money to pay for the voyage. When we arrived in Hong Kong, obviously we arrived in Hong Kong unannounced, and the Hong Kong government, not expecting a boat with 3,000 refugees, stopped us before we came anywhere near the shores and said that you cannot come in, you have to go back. we said, we're not going back. We don't have a choice, so we're just going to stay on this boat until you let us in. We were on all of the news channels because it's not often you find a boat with 3,000 people. But eventually, the Hong Kong government opened up a refugee camp and allowed us to come in. We spent almost a year in 2 different refugee camps in Hong Kong. When I talk to a lot of other boat people, the Vietnamese refugees, one theme that always comes to surface is that you'll always hear refugees saying, we're the lucky ones because we made it. You better make good use of the rest of your life because you were given this second chance. Fortunately, after a year wait, we were sponsored to go to the US. In 1979, we were sponsored by a church group. They helped us get housing in Cleveland, Ohio. It's an entirely different part of the world, different culture. It snows. In fact, one of the most vivid memories for me, taking the bus to school, and then it snowed so heavily that day that when I took the bus back, I couldn't find my way home. Everything was covered in snow. I remember walking past my house and one of my brothers seeing me coming, running out of the house and saying, where are you going? Like, this is home. The fact that my brother was just waiting for me and looking out for me and making sure that I didn't miss where home was and where the family was. In the first kind of, I'm not sure how long, but weeks that we arrived, it's like you're living in a dream and you're in a daze of everything that has happened, but also because everything is new and foreign and you don't have as much control or influence or power that you had back then. And when you lose all of that, it kind of puts you in this kind of dazed and confused situation. And I think that's how we felt for many weeks when we first arrived. But afterwards, I think we were very appreciative of the charities and the church groups that took us in, that found us a place to live, that made sure that we got government assistance, that made sure that we got a job and that we were enrolled in school. When I was younger and I had arrived in the US, there was a motivation and a drive in me to make something happen. I ended up moving into the business field, which I did enjoy, and that is where I ended up in my career. I'm a lot older now and I've had a long career, semi-retired, and I'm kind of happy with what I've achieved. I have a family, I have 2 wonderful kids, I have a wonderful wife. And so I feel happy with my life at the moment. There's always a feeling of shame, right? Because you are shameful of who you are. You're shameful of being fresh off the boat. You're shameful of being a refugee, right? You're shameful of not being American. You try to shed that part of you and you try to adopt what you see on TV. There are parts of your family that you start to feel shame of because they are associated more with that. For example, your parents. But it's a great guilt I feel about my parents. And having to feel ashamed of them. Just going back on that, I think it became kind of such a big part of my life to find an identity. As much as you want to be an American, to an extent you're not. So you are stuck in the middle. Because you're not really your parents, but you're not really the people you see on TV. So who are you? And that was really hard growing up. So I think it's really important to speak to different organizations that are here to support you and help you, to really make use of these services, get that advice that these experts can give you, rather than live in fear or have misinformation. And for those that are concerned about immigration or illegal immigration, just remember that we're talking about human beings. Come to your own personal opinion, because I trust you as a human being to make the right human decision, for what is best for you, for the person that you're affecting, and for this country.